when Oleksandr Usyk defeated Tyson Fury in the ring for a second time, the victorious heavyweight world champion held aloft a great sword in triumph. But this wasn't any old sword, as what Usyk had done was to thrust a great piece of Ukrainian history and independence into the limelight, as the man who wielded this golden-coloured saber was Ivan Mazepa, the Cossack Hetman who is one of the most iconic and significant figures in Ukrainian history. He was a giant figure in his own time and left a cultural legacy that lasted for hundreds of years after his death. A legacy that lasts to this day, as Mazepa's fight against Russia serves as an inspiration to a modern generation of Ukrainians currently engaged in a great battle against Russian domination. Welcome back to History Revealed, and today we have the very rare opportunity to combine heavyweight boxing, historic artifacts and figures, and the current war between Russia and Ukraine. I know, I didn't see that coming either. As we will look at the life and legacy of one of Ukraine's most celebrated figures, Ivan Mazepa, who proves the old adage perfectly. History doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Now, through today's collaboration, I am very lucky to be able to draw on the dedicated work of historian Serhiy Plohi. Plohi is a world-renowned historian who specializes in Eastern European and Slavic history with a special emphasis on Ukraine. He is the director of the Ukrainian Research Institute at Harvard University and recently carried out a dedicated interview on the life of Ivan Mazepa, the link to which will be put in the description. Now, in order to truly understand Mazepa, we must first look at the origins of the Cossacks of Ukraine and how this contributed to forming their key characteristics. So the Cossacks emerged in the 15th and 16th centuries in the vast frontier regions of Eastern Europe, primarily along the Ural, Dnieper, and Don rivers. Initially made up of runaway serfs, outlaws, and adventurers fleeing the centralized authority of feudal lords, they founded autonomous communities in the borderlands of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. These borderlands were politically fragmented and sparsely governed, allowing the Cossacks a degree of independent rule, whilst officially still part of the wider Polish-Lithuanian state. The geopolitical reality of the time also played a major part in defining these future Ukrainians. They were at the center of the political battlefield that was taking place between the major powers of the time, whether it was Poland, Lithuania, Russia, the Ottoman Empire, or the Crimean Khanate. Facing constant raids from the Crimean Khanate, the vassal of the Ottoman Empire, the Cossacks developed into a highly warlike people, becoming warriors of great renown. These fiercely independent frontiersmen became a political wildcard amongst the regional powers, often aligning with or opposing the various states depending on their interests in the exact moment. They were also known as being highly egalitarian and democratic for the day. Their leaders, known as a hetman or an ataman, was often elected by popular vote and could even be removed by the same method. And having understood this context of the Ukrainian Cossacks, we can appreciate just what a remarkable figure Ivan Mazepa was. This was no simple frontier warlord. He was a highly sophisticated and cultured man, educated in Eastern and Western Europe, and a talented polyglot. Having travelled throughout Europe, he could speak Ukrainian, Polish, Russian, Latin, German, French, and Italian. So let's turn to Serhiy Plohi to describe how Mazepa and the Ukrainian Cossacks represented a complex blend of cultures in the 17th century.
Mazepa was a person of more than one world. He started his career as being a young noble at the court of the Polish king. He studied in Europe, but he was also very much part of the Cossack tradition. And what that means, it means that the Cossackdom as a social construction, as a cultural construction, that is a very much a product of interrelation between the West, the European West or center of Europe on the one hand, and the Middle East of today. And if you look at the way how Cossacks were dressed, you will find there elements of the Western culture, but also of the Eastern culture. And
in the 1680s, Mazepa rose through the ranks of the Cossacks, and in 1687, with the support of Russian Prince Vasily Golitsyn, he was elected as Hetman. Despite the turbulence of both the region and the era, Mazepa's rule of the Cossacks saw an unprecedented period of cultural flourishing. The Hetman was a keen patron of the arts, and as Plohi highlights, Ukraine's architectural and general historical heritage owes a great deal of debt to Mazepa.
But mostly because of the imprint that he left and his activities left on the landscape of Kiev, on Ukrainian architectural heritage, and on Ukrainian heritage in general. So if you look at the Kiev Mohila Academy, it's really a revival, and its flourishing in the late 17th and early 18th century comes during the time of Mazepa. Some of the major architectural landmarks that exist today in Kiev were either built by Mazepa or were restored under Mazepa. And in Ukrainian culture, there is a special cultural and architectural style that is known as Mazepa Barocco. So the Baroque style buildings, churches in particular, but not only churches, that were built during the time of Ivan Mazepa.
Printing houses were built, great works of literature were published, and the literacy rate increased during this time. And now we come to the reason that Mazepa is best remembered, his defiance of Russia. When Mazepa became Hetman, although as mentioned the Cossacks were mostly autonomous, they were nominally loyal to Russia and Peter the Great. This was the case because of the 1654 Pereyaslav Agreement, where in order to secure military protection from Russia, the Cossacks swore allegiance to the Tsar, Alexei. And this loyalty would be put to the test at the start of the 18th century as the Great Northern War broke out, a seismic conflict between Russia and the Swedish Empire, one of Europe's foremost powers of the day, led by its young and ambitious king, Charles XII. Mazepa and the Hetmanate would become an important source of manpower for Tsar Peter. Tens of thousands of Cossack troops were put at his disposal. They were used not only on the battlefield against the Swedes, but in labour-intensive roles like the building of fortifications. Russia suffered terrible defeats at the hands of Sweden in northern Europe, with the Cossacks sharing in this misery, taking thousands of casualties of their own. The Cossacks who were away from the battlefield fared little better. The ones working in construction for Peter faced appalling conditions. They died of overwork, exposure, and disease, further alienating Mazepa from the Tsar. Relations between the two men deteriorated even further, as Peter instigated a series of reforms seeking to abolish the autonomy of the Hetmanate altogether. This caused much consternation amongst not only Mazepa, but the elite of the Cossack Hetmanate society, who zealously guarded their independence. But the final straw which caused Mazepa to dramatically change sides in the war came when Tsar Peter decided to abandon the Cossacks when they came under threat from the armies of the King of Poland, Charles XII's ally. Mazepa felt particularly betrayed by the Russians. Military protection was the key reason the Cossacks had sworn allegiance to the Tsar in the first place, and now when their lands were threatened, despite repeated requests for troops, none were forthcoming from Peter. The abandonment was felt all the more keenly, given the Hetmanate had provided a great deal of resources and thousands of Ukrainian lives had been lost while pursuing Peter's war aims. And so Mazepa made the fateful decision that would echo throughout Ukrainian history. He defied the Russians and changed sides in the war, joining Charles XII in his war against the Tsar. However, this audacious gambit would ultimately fail. An enraged Peter the Great sent his army to the Cossack capital of Baturin. They sacked the city, razed it to the ground, and slaughtered thousands. The ultimate fate of Mazepa and Charles XII was decided on the battlefield in 1709. As in this year, the Battle of Poltava took place. It was the most decisive of the Great Northern War. Sweden and the Cossacks suffered a catastrophic defeat, ending any hopes of empire for Charles XII and dooming any dreams of independence for Mazepa and the Cossack Hetmanate. Mazepa would die shortly afterwards, but despite his failure in life, he went on to become an inspiration for future generations of Ukrainians, whilst becoming an anathema to the Russians. Under his rule, in both a political and cultural sense, the beginnings of a Ukrainian national identity began to emerge. Let's see what Plohi's got to say.
And he certainly led when it comes to the political thought of the period. It was he who was named first the father of the fatherland. So he clearly had these ambitions of being the leader of his people, leader of his nation. And when he was accused by Peter of betraying the Tsar and switching sides and going on the side of Charles XII, he issued a number of letters addressed to the Ukrainian population at large, addressed to the Cossacks, where he was saying that his loyalty was not loyalty to the Tsar. His loyalty was loyalty to the fatherland. So these ideas of the early modern nationhood and early modern nation identities that really didn't exist at that time in Russia. Only a few years later, after Mazepa's death, Peter actually takes over the title of the father of the fatherland. the title that actually was created specifically for Mazepa by people like Theophan Prokopovich and others.
Mazepa would become one of the most famous figures in Ukrainian history. He became known all throughout Europe in the 18th and 19th centuries, with his name becoming synonymous with the struggle for freedom and independence. His fame and prominence in the popular imagination was in no small part due to his featuring in the works of great writers like Voltaire, Lord Byron, and Victor Hugo. In the works of these great authors, Mazepa is the quintessential romantic figure in the Age of Enlightenment. He symbolizes rebellion, endurance, and the human struggle against destiny. But just as Mazepa is a hero to Ukrainians, his name is synonymous with treason for Russians. Mazepa was excommunicated by the Russian Orthodox Church, and in the Russian Empire he was portrayed as an opportunist and a traitor. Any positive portrayals of the man were censored. In the 19th century, Ukrainians who campaigned for political or cultural rights were labelled Mazepists by the Russian Empire, attempting to tar them with the brush of treason. And this portrayal would continue into the Soviet era, where he was labelled a bourgeois nationalist by the communists, as part of their attempts to discredit any notion of Ukrainian nationalism or independence. However, following Ukraine's independence in 1991, his image underwent a major revival. He became a national hero of the new country, and today his face even appears on Ukrainian banknotes. And as we saw from Oleksandr Usyk as he proudly held the saber in the air, Mazepa's ability to inspire Ukrainians has by no means diminished. But I'll leave the final word on that to Serhiy Plohi.
And what happened now with Usyk appearing with this saber after the victory? And this saber is not only about the readiness of Ukrainians to revolt and resist in the name of freedom, as Mazepa became known through literature, through his own history. But that saber becomes a symbol of victory. And that is a new theme. That is a theme that didn't exist in Voltaire. This is the theme in the interpretation of Mazepa that didn't exist in Byron or Ryleev, and certainly wouldn't exist in Pushkin. So now we have this symbol, and now we have this hope, and we have this determination, and we have an example that Usyk had set for all of us.
Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video on one of Ukraine and Europe's truly compelling figures. And isn't it wonderful to see how historical legacies can live on centuries after their time and be of real importance in the present day, with the challenges of a previous generation suddenly resonating with the challenges of a current one. Please like, subscribe, share this video, leave a sacrifice to the god of the algorithm by commenting. Let me know what you thought of the video. Did you like it? Did you learn something new? Are there any other topics you'd like me to cover? Something on Ukraine, something else? I'm open to all suggestions, so let me know what you think. And a very special thanks goes to my wonderful Patreon supporters. Their names are on the screen right now. If you'd like to join them and support this channel, I'll leave a link in the description below and you can join up. So until next time, it's goodbye for now.